located near Twining, New Mexico, and Hazel talks about the time that they spent and some of the things that they saw in Twining, New Mexico, and says that Manoir painted a number of canvases there. But I wanted to think a little bit about the importance of this particular site, and we can kind of consider if that relates to some of the impact that this painting does have. If you're not familiar with the area, this is, okay, here's of course Taos, the Pueblo, and then here is Twining, and you can see it also says Taos Ski Valley. This is a more recent map. And on the left, there's another map that I wanted to show you to give you an indication. It's called the Twining Blue Lake Trail, if you can read that kind of contour map, which comes down from the area of Twining towards Wheeler Peak in this vicinity. And the reason that this site is so important is the fact that this whole area, this region around Blue Lake, was something that was very much in the forefront of news in 1924. So here we see a photograph of Blue Lake, and here again on the map shows Blue Lake in the relationship to the location of Taos. So Twining is very close to Blue Lake, which is a sacred site to the Pueblo Indians of Taos Pueblo. It is their place of origin and also the place that the deceased souls return to. And religious ceremonies were practiced at Blue Lake until 1906, when the U.S. government appropriated, that's a nice word, isn't it, 48,000 acres of land, including Blue Lake, for a national forest, and opened it up to multi-purpose use, which included logging, mining, and recreational camping. So at the time that Manoir and these other artists are visiting this area in 1924, this is still open to the public, even though this is a sacred site for the Taos Pueblo Indians. That year, 1924, is especially important because it was that year that the Pueblo Lands Act was passed, which established the Pueblo Lands Board. And as part of this, the government offered to provide compensation to the Taos Pueblo for the land that they had taken in 1906. Of course, the compensation was based on 1906 value of the land, not 1924. But the Taos Pueblo was not interested in compensation for the land. They wanted the rights to the land, because since it is a sacred site, having people come in and camp and litter and do various things in this area made it impossible for them to practice their religious ceremonies on these grounds. So the battle kind of continued, but this 1924 date, when Manoir was in this area, I think would have been a very significant time, and may have encouraged even more artists to visit the area, to look at it. But again, I think we have to think about the fact that, by virtue of the fact that Manoir was there painting that site, it was a sacred grove, and yet there were Anglo artists who were coming into the area and visiting the site and painting on it. And of course, here is that painting again by Martin Hennings, which is called Going to Blue Lake. So again, you get that idea of Native Americans going to participate in a ceremony at this sacred site. And just kind of a jump forward in time, it wasn't until 1970 that the title of the land was given back to the Taos Pueblo And actually that was part of the Blue Lake Bill that was signed by Richard Nixon in 1970. So here we see Nixon signing that bill along with representatives from the Taos Pueblo. And just an interesting side note, right in the front row, it's kind of hard to see, is Senator Fred Harris and his wife LaDonna Harris. Senator Harris was from Oklahoma, and his wife LaDonna was very instrumental in encouraging politicians to pass this bill. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting side note that there's a little Oklahoma connection there. So this, I think, gives us kind of maybe a new thing to think about when we look at this painting of this area that doesn't depict Blue Lake, but depicts this sacred area in this vicinity that was all part of this kind of contested area. You know, from 1906 until 1970, the Taos Pueblo really, you know, had to fight for the right to practice their religion on their sacred site that they had been assured would be theirs forever. But I think it gets us back to a point about the painting and some of the impact that it has on people. And this is a quote from Hazel Manoir in her book about her husband's art. And she says, "It is not nature, but the spirit of nature that interests Manoir." And it seems that comes through in this painting and some of the descriptions that you all were sharing with me. We sense that there's that he was really interested in the spirit of nature, the spirituality of the site, I think, is conveyed in his painting. I wanted to show you just a couple of other examples of artists who were also drawn to this area. Here's Joseph Henry Sharp, one of the most well-known of the Taos Society of Artists. His painting, Aspen's at Twining, same location. We'll come back to this in just a second. And this is a photograph much later by Elliot Porter, also Aspen's in Twining, New Mexico from 1949. But I wanted to just quickly compare Manoir's painting, Aspen's in Snow, with Joseph Henry Sharp's painting on the right. And do you see, what kinds of differences do you see in the two paintings? Obviously, they're basically the same site, but how are they different? Different use of color.
More pastels.
Okay. So this is Sharp.
Sure.
Sharp.
Manoir has a personal feeling to it, and you can imagine yourself. I can imagine myself in the Manoir and wanting to explore. But in Twining, or in the one on the right, it's more of a visual exploration rather than wanting to do a physical exploration. And there's more shelter in the Manoir. Being a shelter rather than
Okay, so I like that description of more of a sense of shelter here in the Manoir. And you feel much more of a personal kind of invitation to explore into that area. Anything else?
There's somehow more connectedness to the people that are there that you really can't see, but they're like shadows of people almost that you're drawn to that is totally absent in the Sharp.
Right. And I think that's a really significant difference, is that Manoir has chosen to represent this group of people here in his painting. It doesn't seem that they're actually performing a ceremony, but perhaps they're coming back from one. But there is that human connection in Manoir's that we don't have in Sharp's at all. Just by virtue of the choice of whether to depict the Taos
I
movement.
get the feeling of getting ready to take a journey in the memoir,
Mhm.
and this one just, that's the site,
Okay.
expectancy.
Okay, sense of expectancy, that invitation to take a journey.
But if anyone has spent many days in the summertime in Colorado or northern New Mexico, I was feeling I started getting really nostalgic for the 2 summers we lived in Colorado at an apartment Snake's Camp with my husband Todd. And I just got to wander around and enjoy the view. And that says to me the height of summer.
Which one? The
Yes,
shark? Yeah.
The shark.
Yeah. It does seem like a different scene.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think it's just interesting that, obviously other artists were drawn to this same area, but there is that difference about Manoir's depiction of it that I think does draw us in more as visitors in general. Just wanted to briefly give you a little bit of information about what happened in between the time the painting was done in 1924 and until it became part of the Tom's collection. We do know that it was exhibited at the Art Institute of Chicago in 1925 after Irving, Manoir, and Hazel returned to Chicago. And then in 1927, it was entered in the Louisville Art Association International Competition, and it won the first prize, which was $500, which, in 1927 was not too shabby. And the following year, in 1928, the painting was purchased by the Louisville Art Association. And then I found this next bit of information interesting on a personal note. In 1955, it was donated to the J.B. Speed Art Museum. And for those of you who know our former director, Guylaine Demiere, is now the director of the J.B. Speed Art Museum. And for some reason, for which I have no idea, the Speed made the decision in 1977 to deaccession the Manoir painting, which is how it came up for auction. And then it had 2 other owners before Bill Toms purchased it in 1981. So that's just in a nutshell sort of the path that the Manoir painting has taken to find its way here to the University of Oklahoma, gifted by Bill Toms in 2003 in the Grave Roxanne. But I just find that really interesting about the Speed connection with Guylaine going there.
Susan, I had a question about that word. What was that?
Deaccession.
That's an interesting verb.
Well, when a painting becomes part of a museum's collection, it's accessioned. It becomes part of the collection, and when it leaves a collection, it's
That's been
deaccessioned.
rejected.
For whatever reason, the painting was sold from the Speed, and sometimes museums do that as they are shifting focus on their collecting policies and decide that some things don't fit as well with the focus of the collection, and so there's the money is then used to purchase things for the collection that fits more with the current direction of the museum. So, but again, I have no idea why the Speed decided to deaccession it when they did, but that's just part of the provenance. Yes.
Yeah, first of all, let me apologize. I'm expecting a call, and so I'm asking a question, but I could be interrupted at any moment. When I first saw the painting, it reminded me more in terms of coloration than composition of the Canadian Blue 7 or Tom Thompson, who was the precursor of the Canadian Blue 7. Do you know if there was any connection between Manoir and the Blue 7?
Not that I know of. He traveled widely, but I don't know if he ever.
I mean, I imagine that painting landscape, I mean, there's a range of palettes and
Right,
colors
right.
you would use, but the dark light and the shade of green are very similar to
It's interesting.
some.
I'm not familiar with that group, so I'll have to look at it. There's no connection that I know of. I'm not saying definitively that there was not, but I don't recall any of. Obviously, there's very little information on him, but I don't. In Hazel's discussion of all their travels, I don't recall that there's any. That's interesting. But I know we're right at 1 o'clock, so I did want to leave you with a quote that was actually, it's an excerpt from the Louisville, Kentucky Herald Post from January 22nd, 1928, the year the painting was acquired by the Louisville Art Association. This is a quote by the art critic Philip Cole that I thought would be an interesting thing to leave us with as we look at this painting by Irving Manoir. He writes, "Now I come to one of the 3 pictures I liked best. Fairy Tale Land of New Mexico," remember that was his original title, by Irving Manoir. "It's a beautiful, imaginative, atmospheric, perfectly lovely thing. Look at it a long time. Don't miss any of it. That is the kind of picture that makes one long to be a millionaire so as to be able to carry it home and keep it forever. I am deeply grateful to the artist for some of the most satisfying moments of my life experienced while I was looking at it." That's pretty good praise from an art critic. Who, oftentimes, are critical. But I thought that was a really interesting commentary on the painting. And with that said, I invite you to go look at the actual painting by Irving Manoir in the museum. It's the paint quality, of course, doesn't come through at all. You can see the thick application of the paint. It looks like he used like a palette knife in areas, and you really can see all the wonderful details of the application of paint when you look at the actual work. But before I did want to point out to you that we are now concluding our discussion of landscape paintings from the museum's collection. And in July 15th of the month, we start a new series of abstract art, and we'll start off with a painting by Eugene Babinger, who's from right here in Norman, Oklahoma, called Atmospheric. And it kind of bridges the gap between landscape and abstraction because it's kind of a landscape-esque abstract painting. So we'll move on into thinking about abstract paintings for this next series. But thank you all very much for being here today.